Hello friends, I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for being here. As always, I hope you had a great weekend. I hope that you got to spend some time with family and friends, if you're allowed to at this point. Here in West Virginia, we are semi-open. Restaurants were allowed to open on a half capacity. And I got to take the girls out. We went to Bob Evans on Sunday. We normally go on Sundays. Every Sunday we would go out to lunch. We had like 3 different spots that we would hit. And then, we haven't done that since March. So we got to do that this weekend. It was nice. Yeah. It was very nice. It was something that we hadn't done in a very long time. We've still been hanging out on Sundays, but we hadn't been able to go out and eat. But that's not what I want to talk to you today about. Today I wanted to talk to you about the project that I'm working on. And I'm going to break a rule and I'm going to tell you what it is. I'm going to tell you about it. It's a rule I've had for a few years now because I learned a few years ago that when I have an idea for something that festers, that sticks in my head and that doesn't want to come out, I learned that if I talk about it, then just talking about it, just getting the validation of, oh, that sounds like a good idea, is all of the validation that I need from that thing, and then I'll never do it. So I try really hard not to talk about projects that are, that are going to take time or that are big here on this particular format, because when I talk about it and then I get responses, then I'm just like, cool, I don't have to make it now because I've already gotten the validation that I needed. But I think in this case, I'm not necessarily looking for validation. I'm using this project for professional learning, for some personal, just as a hobby, just seeking something that I've kind of wanted to create since I was a kid. And it's kind of given me a little bit of my roots of when I started writing software as a 10-year-old or 8, I think I was 8 when I first started, what that meant to me and what I thought I could do with that. So if you don't know, what I've been working on for the past month-ish is a website called NoRoguesAllowed.com, and it started as an idea to make a web, basically an HTML and PHP video game. I hesitate to call it a video game because there's not going to be any video. In fact, there's not going to be art. I mean, there'll be icons, there'll be representations of things, but there's not going to be visuals. It's going to be largely text-based. It's going to be descriptions of things. And it falls into a category of game that is been known more recently as a roguelite. Now, Rogue was a game that came out in, I want to say early 80s. It might have even been late 70s. It was a text-based adventure game that was kind of a, it was a new thing, essentially. I don't think it was the first, but the idea was you were the ampersand symbol. At that time, graphics weren't really a thing on computers, so you were the little ampersand symbol, and you used your arrow keys to move the ampersand around the screen, and other enemies would be generated that would be other symbols, and each symbol represented a type of enemy, and you could sneak around and kill them and get their stuff and then equip yourself, and it was an adventure game, and the idea was to make it through lots of levels. And those were called rogues. And the thing that makes them a rogue game is, one, you progress through levels. So generally you're going into the depths of a dungeon, or you're going to the top of a tower, or you're going across enchanted forest or something like that, and you're gaining gear and you're gaining levels and you're getting more powerful and you're attacking more powerful enemies and facing bigger challenges and traps and that sort of stuff. And the other thing is, if you die, that's it. There's no saving in this game. There's just, if you die, you're done and you start over. That's what makes a rogue a rogue. A roguelike. Then there started to become roguelites. In the original Rogue, you had to kind of manage your food, because as you started to starve, you would lose health. You had to manage light, because if you couldn't see, the map wouldn't show up and you wouldn't be able to see enemies that you were facing. So you had torches that you had to maintain, you had food that you had to maintain. to make it through this dungeon. And over the years, people have started to do roguelites, dungeon kind of games, but without all the food and torches. Some have torches without the moving around a map. Some of them are even just 2D, like side scrollers. Some of them are card games, and they've all kind of taken on the nomenclature of roguelite, meaning that it's like a roguelike in a sense that it's progressive through a dungeon, procedurally generated, which means that it's not, the levels aren't designed. They're created on the fly by the software. And that's what I'm creating. But I'm getting rid of everything except for loot, essentially. That's not true. There's going to be some progression. You're going to have a character. You're going to have levels. You're going to have classes. You're going to have potions that you can choose to spend for this or that, ways to get in and out of combat. But for the most part, it's going to be, you enter a room, you get a description of that room. There's probably enemies in that room. Not always, but there'll probably be enemies in that room. And those enemies might be carrying, weapons that are special or wearing armor that is special that you can loot if you defeat them. And the room might have treasure in it that you can also loot. And then once you've completed a room, you'll choose the next room to go to, and so on and so on. There won't be a map. It'll just be room after room. There's no backtracking. It's just you're trying to get out of this particular situation. And so you can go to NoRoguesAllowed.com right now, and you can see the weapon generation. I started there because it was fun. I wanted to see what it was like, how to go about creating dynamically generated weapons with cool abilities and cool names. And so I started just kind of collecting adjectives and nouns and prefixes for weapons and putting them into a table and a database. And I created that, and then that's where this all, kind of turned into this kind of snowballing project. Well, right now, I was going to work on characters next. I was going to work on character generation, how I was going to go about starting you with a character. Maybe it was going to be you create your character or you just choose one. It's probably going to be you just choose one. This is going to be the lightest of roguelites. It's going to have the bare minimum, fun. Or not fun. I think the fun's going to be there. I don't know yet. Haven't played it. But it's going to have the bare minimum choices. It's going to be the simplest roguelite you've ever seen. But with a whole bunch of complex equipment and stuff. So that the equipment management is the main name of the game. So I was going to do characters, but then I decided I want to do rooms next. And I want to do rooms next because rooms, I think, of all the parts of the game, I want to procedurally generate room descriptions. So an old text-based adventure, say Zork or something back in the day, you would be, you would type in, I want to go left, and then it would say, you enter into a room, and then there's a vast cavern, and it's filled with water, and waterfalls streak down the walls, and to the left you see this, and to the right you see that. And I want to turn that into something that I can procedurally create on the fly. Much shorter descriptions, like 2-sentence descriptions. It's a musty room full of bones, and you see a shelf with a thing on it. Very short descriptions, but I want to create those on the fly. And I don't want to write all of that. I mean, I do. I have written a whole lot. But I would like for the people who want to participate in this game, who want to play the game, who want to enjoy the game, I would like for those people to help me write. So I've tweeted a few things, like, could you give me descriptions of weapons? Could you give me descriptions of rooms? And I've gotten some responses, some really good responses. But what I'm thinking right now is, I'm working on the room generation. What if I just make the site that it is, as it is currently, what if I turn that into a Mad Lib? And so you would get a room description and a weapon description that are kind of generic, with some spaces for you to fill in some adjectives or some adverbs or some pronouns, and then you hit go, and then whatever you typed in, it uses that to generate a new room with a new item, and you get a fun little experience for yourself, as well as I get data in my database that I can then filter through and use, or choose to use or choose not to use in the overall thing. And I've had this thought for a while, that I would always make that a part of the program. When I was a kid, there was a game called Scorched Earth, and it was this little tank shooting thing. It was like you versus 7 computer-controlled tanks on this little 2D thing, and you'd have to control like the pitch and the power of your shot and wind direction and all that stuff to hit the tanks. And they'd have these little sayings that they would say when they would shoot each other or when they would die. And those sayings were just stored in a text file in the game's directory. And you could just go into that text file and just write your own stuff in there. And I always thought that was super fun, like to just be able to say, you know, when I was a kid, I said, you know, kind of grotesque things, you know, or obscene things, I should say. But, you know, you could just write whatever you wanted in there. And so every now and then when somebody would die, you would see your little sentence come up and it was like, ah, I wrote that. So I wanted that to be a part of this game. And I knew that eventually I was going to make it so that you could add your own stuff. But I had always thought it would just be like a page you could go to where you could say, suggest a weapon prefix like steel or whatever, and you could just type something in and hit enter, and that was it. And then I realized that's not very fun. Like, who's going to do that? Who besides me is going to go do that sort of thing? I don't think there's a lot of me's out there who want to, you know, mess with the granularity of the game. Instead, like, why can't I turn putting words into the database a little bit of a game of its own, a little bit of a Mad Lib, a little bit of a just silliness? I think that's going to be interesting, and I'd love to know what you think. One, if you were to play this game, would you want to contribute? And two, would you want to do it in a very structured, like, I let you pick what you're adding, what, you know, kind of modifier that has, whatever, or would you rather it to be more of a loose, like, you know, Mad Lib? I don't know. That's the current direction. I'll let you tell me what you think. Please do, in the comments. I really love hearing from you. So thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you. I'll see you tomorrow. Today's word you should know is beatitude. It is a noun meaning being in the highest possible state of happiness, good humor, and contentment. Kindness is a virtue neither modern nor urban. One almost unlearns it in a city. Towns have their own beatitude. They are not unfriendly. They offer a vast and solacing anonymity or an equally vast and solacing gregariousness. Phyllis McGinley, an American author and poet. Beatitude. B-E-A-T-I-T-U-D-E.